good evening to everyone. We're so excited to have you all here. My name's Patricia White, and I'm a professor of film and media studies at Swarthmore College. And I'm just thrilled that we've had such great turnout. But I'm not surprised because we have a very special SWAT talk tonight. And I want to say that the Alumni Council put this all together. And our talk is sort of timed for the holidays, or more specifically timed for a holiday release. That is the year-end release of 2022's biggest film, Avatar: The Way of Water. This is the first of James Cameron's sequels to the legendary 2009 film, which is the highest grossing film of all time. So let's, hope the next ones carry that forward. I hope that some of you have had a chance to catch the film over the weekend, hence the timing of the talk. We give you that opening box office weekend. The film took in almost $500 million globally, so it's doing well. And we're extremely fortunate to have two people, very eminent Swarthmore alums, to discuss the film, Avatar: The Way of Water, and the broader context of U.S. film and media culture. And first of all, Stephen Lang, class of 73, honorary degree recipient from the college in 2010, who came back from the dead to reprise his role, or the seeming dead, as Colonel Miles Quaritch in the film. Lang will be interviewed, or there'll be a back and forth, by prominent author and film and cultural critic Peter Biskin, class of 62. And before I introduce them in a little more detail, I just want to thank those behind the scenes who made this happen on Alumni Council and in the Office of Alumni and Parent Engagement. So Bo Hee Yoon, who has graciously lent her apartment to Stephen so that he can make his next Way of Water gig at Lincoln Center. He's going to be whisked away in a car right as we end, so he can get there by 9:15. So we'll be efficient. So Bohi, thank you. Dina Zangaro, Jason Zengerly, Jeff Semenuk and the staff in Alumni and Parent Engagement, and also Stephen Lang's team, who I'm sure you've just, have helped you get through these whirlwind of gigs around the opening of the film, which I'm sure will continue. So I'm going to give a little introduction to Stephen and to Peter, and the format will be that Peter will probably ask most of the questions to Stephen at first. I may jump in, and then half an hour in, we'll start taking questions from the Q&A function. So you can use the chat, but we won't pick up questions from there. So Q&A is where you put your questions. So I'm delighted to welcome Stephen Lang, who's an actor renowned for his performances on stage, screen, and TV. In addition to perhaps his best known role as Colonel Miles Quaritch, Lang's also received quite recently quite a bit of acclaim for his role in the thriller 2016's Don't Breathe and its recent sequel. Other very recent roles include The Lost City, The Independent, and on TV, recurring role in The Good Fight. His extensive film credits include Manhunter, Last Exit to Brooklyn, one of my favorites, Tombstone, one of many people's favorites, and is also celebrating an anniversary. We might hear a little bit more about that. Gettysburg, which is a film that also is in Stephen's wheelhouse as somebody who's as a scholar, really, who's interested in Gettysburg, and he's written a book called The Wheatfield, an illustrated telling of the Battle of Gettysburg. A couple other films, the Gods and Generals, Public Enemies, Conan the Barbarian, just a wonderful filmography, great characters. He's also had an extensive career on Broadway, receiving a Tony Award nomination for his role in The Speed of Darkness, and appearing in A Few Good Men, Death of a Salesman, among others, as well as in more than 100 performances of his solo play Beyond Glory. He's also a playwright and screenwriter, and I mentioned a writer, and a longtime member of the Actors Studio, where he sits on the board of directors and has served as a vice president and co-artistic director in the early 2000s. He's actively involved in the philanthropic activities of the foundation established by his father, Eugene M. Lang. So it's wonderful to have Stephen here, but I think it's really special to have Peter to talk to Stephen. So Peter Biskin, 62, whose books on American film history are featured prominently on my course syllabi. So Biskin's the author of Seeing is Believing, about American ideology in films of the 50s. The classic Easy Rider's Raging Bull, about the new Hollywood of the 70s. Yeah. Down and Dirty Pictures, and now we learned how down and dirty they really are, about the explosion of indie filmmaking in the 90s with a focus on Miramax and Sundance. Star, a biography of Warren Beatty, and recently The Sky is Falling, how vampires, zombies, androids, and superheroes made America great for extremism. Great, great title and super insightful. He was the editor of American Film Magazine, founding editor of Premiere Magazine, and he's a contributor to Vanity Fair, Esquire, The Nation, many other publications, and has a new book, as yet untitled, about post-network television from HBO through the streamers. So I think this is a particularly fortuitous pairing because many of Lang's characters really are prisms of the complexity of American national identity and American values that Peter examines so astutely in his writing. So I want to welcome both of our guests, and I'm going to allow Peter to pose a question to Stephen, or Stephen, if you want to have some words to say at the beginning, that's fine too.
Thank you, Patty. Thanks for such a gracious introduction. It's good to be here. Hello to all my Swarthmore alums and colleagues. Thanks for joining us. And Peter, it's always good to see you. So here I am, ask away.
Okay. All right. Well, the first obvious question is, what got you interested in acting?
I think probably television got me interested in acting. It was probably watching, Robin Hood and the adventures of Zorro and Rin Tin Tin. It's not that I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be a bandit, or I wanted to be a cowboy. I wanted to be an astronaut. I had a good, sort of a fervent imagination, and acting seemed to be a great way to do it. And what I really think is that I had a calling. I had a calling to be in acting, not to be an actor. And it's not unlike when they talk about a calling to become a priest. And that's not to say that the calling means I'm going to be a great actor or even a good actor. But I do think that I knew the profession that I belonged in from a very early age.
Did you do any acting at Swarthmore?
I did. I was a bit of an outlier in terms of the department, although when I got there was no department per se. It was extracurricular. But I had the opportunity. I acted in Hedda Gabler in my freshman year, and I played the Scottish King there, and I directed Waiting for Godot, and I also wrote and starred in 2 Hamburg shows during my time there. So, and my grades, so I worked very, very hard in the theater, and my grades reflected that. I was, I was definitely I'll take a C anytime.
So when you graduated, were you already determined to become an actor?
I thought I'd give it a shot. I remember getting a call from my sister Jane, another Swarthmore alum, who said, "Come on down to Washington and tell me what you're going to do with your life." So I did. I went down there and I stayed with her, and I got a job at the Folger Theater, first on the crew. I was banging nails for them, and then I auditioned for Henry IV Part 1, and I got a small role in that. And some of the actors who were in the show had come down from New York to do it, and they encouraged me to come to New York, which was easy because it was coming home for me since I am a New Yorker. And I just came and started knocking on the doors and auditioning, and one thing always led to another. It was always hopeful enough to continue on.
And how did you segue from the theater into movies?
Well, I think I really was. I'm not a conservatory trained actor. And so I had a certain amount of insecurity when I came to New York. I was well educated, I knew Shakespeare well. I'd gotten a thorough grounding from Professor Sue Snyder at Swarthmore. I knew my Milton, but I didn't. I hadn't gone to Juilliard. I hadn't gone to Yale School of Drama. So I really felt in many ways that I was kind of flying solo here. So I really wanted to learn to act. And so I was taking jobs in regional theaters all over, and I really spent the 70s doing that. And I did my season at the Guthrie, and that was wonderful. And I learned to become, an actor. And then when I came back to New York, I would audition, and I auditioned for the thing that changed everything for me. I had done some TV, gotten a shot here and there. Very significantly, I did a show for PBS called Anyone for Tennyson, in which I played Percy Bysshe Shelley. And it's memorable, really, because that's where I met Tina. I met my wife on that show. So, that was an event. But the thing that changed things for me a bit was, and really got me into film, was when I auditioned for Death of a Salesman and was cast as Happy in Dustin Hoffman's Death of a Salesman. So it was Dustin, John Malkovich played Biff, and I played Happy. And that was one of those shows that everybody had to go to. It was it was a must see. Sold out, standing room only, every performance we ever gave. And that created some opportunities in film. And that's how it, I made my debut in a film directed by Bud Yorkin called something. It had a title. But I'll tell you the cast. It was Gene Hackman. So I'm acting right away with a true hero of mine. And Margaret, I'm acting with somebody who I absolutely was passionately in love with, the great Ellen Burstyn, who went on to become a very, very dear friend of mine, Amy Madigan, Brian Dennehy, Ali Sheedy, just a really, really fine cast of an ensemble. So it was a great way to break into features.
Well, and something like Death of a Salesman, was it intimidating? It must have been intimidating to work with people like Dustin Hoffman and John Malkovich and...
Well, it was very on stage, Dustin. I wouldn't say I found it particularly intimidating. We all worked well together. There was an equality I felt. Dustin set the tone. He's a relentless searcher, a true artist in that respect, never satisfied. So intimidating, I just wanted to be good, and I had done the play before. I knew that play better than Arthur Miller knew that play. So I can't say that I've been intimidated over the years here now and then, but not so much there. When we got in to make the film of Death of a Salesman, it was a little bit different. That was tougher for me. Yeah, definitely. It was tougher because I think Dustin felt the need to be definitive. When you're working on stage and you're doing 8 a week, or in Dustin's case, we did 6 a week. When you're doing 6 a week, you always have the next performance. So you're always evolving and changing. But when we were going to do the film of Death of a Salesman, it was very important to him that we kind of do it definitively. And that put some pressure on all of us, I felt.
When you said there were times where you were intimidated, like when? Who
intimidates me as a director or as another?
Well, as an actor and director, whatever.
I don't know. And intimidate's not the right word. I try to stand up for myself if I can. I've worked with some tough cookies. I mean, I did a picture with Seagal, and we could do a whole, but we don't want to spend a whole lot of time.
No, I know. Let's not do that. Let's not go there.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the difference between acting in movies and acting on stage?
I guess acting, is fundamentally, I think acting is acting. And particularly as I get older and as I continue to try to master both the art and the craft of acting, I do believe it's really a question of being as simple and as honest as one possibly can. I think that the differences between working on stage and working on film are essentially differences in degree. That you will hear people say, well, you need to be bigger on stage than on film. But I don't know. If you look at an actor as great as Jack Nicholson, he works very big. sometimes, quite often, it seems to me.
But
So I'm not sure, you know, what to say about it. I think maybe I've been doing it for so long and going back and forth that it all seems quite organic to me.
But in film, you act out of sequence often. I mean, you know, at
But
least
of course, you rehearse out of sequence too. But that is true. That's why I say it becomes so organic to me that I don't think about it. But absolutely, that's an obvious difference. When you're working out of sequence, when you finish a scene, a tough scene on a film, there's a real feeling of kind of being purged because you're done with it. You know, hopefully you got it right, but you're done with it. And there's always that scene in a movie, the one that you're dreading, you know, whether it's the love scene or the confession scene or the whatever, the attempted suicide scene or something, the one that you're dreading. And once it's done, it's done. Of course, if you're doing, you know, Hamlet, you have to contemplate suicide 8 times a week. And, you know, it's just that much more difficult, I guess. But I have no preference between the two. I love working in both areas. Certainly, I've been working far more in film than in on stage for a while now.
well, you've worked with some, you know, major directors, like you did Manhunter with Michael Mann in '86, and then you also worked with Sidney Lumet and Robert Altman. I'm curious about what your take on these various directors is.
Wow, I feel
And they're very different. I mean,
yeah, they're different. And I'm so fortunate to have worked with those guys. Robert Altman was just the great, you know, just great. I loved Robert Altman so deeply. I love his movies. And then working with him was such a wonderful, companionable experience. Bob, the whole thing, you'll hear other actors say, it was a party. With Bob, you know, you get together for dailies. There's always meals involved. And he was just he could be very gruff. He was big, you know, he's a powerful guy, but is just a sweetheart. And his wife, Catherine, who was always with him, just kind of leavened everything as well. But he was a sharp director. The thing I did with him was called Killer App. And it was written by Gary Trudeau. And this was going to be a series. And I was playing the villain of the series, surprise, and great part, kind of based on a combination of one of the, what's his name, you know, the guy who founded Apple. And it's kind of a combination of Satan and Steve Jobs, this character I played. And Bob was directing it, and it was for Fox, and he went in and the studio executives made the mistake of giving him notes. Now, which, you know, that should be normal, right? And Bob told me, he related this to me. So he said, and I said to them, I'm Bob Altman. Who the hell are you? And he scared them. He pure and simple scared them. And so they didn't move forward with the show because they were frightened of Bob and what he would do, you know. And I was saying, can't you just be nice, man? I want to do this show. But then I did another one with him called Trixie that he produced and Alan Rudolph directed. That was good. And I wished I would have loved to have done more with him. Lumet was a great director. Of course, Lumet comes from the theater and from live television as well. And Sidney he'd rehearse the stuff, you know, just really, he'd tape everything out and it would be rehearsed, just like doing an old Broadway play in a way. And then you do it. He was a pleasure to work with. A very wonderful man. And then
Michael Mann has a reputation of being a real tough guy. Was that your experience?
Yeah, Michael is a tough guy. He can be quite autocratic, but I love him, and I've worked for him a lot. And my mission or my modus operandi with Michael is essentially, if he says jump, I say how high, because I don't want to get in a debate with him, because it can, you know. Now with Cameron, with Jim, I'll debate all day. I'm just completely happy to go toe to toe. But Michael's he's gonna win, you know, and so there's just no point to it. So I kind of circumvent it, you know, and if I can. But he's a great director, and Yeah, and I just saw him the other night. He came to the premiere of Avatar in LA, and I haven't seen him in 4 or 5 years. It's great to see him. I hope we'll do another one together.
When did you join the Actors Studio?
I think I joined in 79. I auditioned for the studio. I didn't have a home. Remember I said before, I'm not a Juilliard guy. I'm not a Yale
Right.
guy. I never really had a network or a home. And so I was a friend of mine, an actor who I'd worked with in Pittsburgh. I did Stanley Kowalski in Pittsburgh. And he said, Len, you are studio. You are studio. So I went and I auditioned for the studio. And after my audition, truthfully, I said to myself, it doesn't matter if I get in or not, because I'll never do better work than I just did then. I did an adaptation of a scene from Camus' Caligula that I rewrote essentially, and I did it, and then and I was admitted to the studio, and that's been my home for better or for worse since now for 45 years, 43 years.
Well, who did you study with? I mean, there are a number of famous acting teachers there.
You don't really study at the studio. It's really a gymnasium for actors. You work there, and I did a lot of work. And there's a moderator, and for many, many years I've been a moderator when I have the time and inclination to do it. But I did work for the likes of, first of all, Geraldine Page. Geraldine Page is one of the great actors in the American canon. And I worked for Jerry a number of times. For Lee Grant. Lee Grant is, very, very important. Such a wonderful, sharp eye, as an actor and as a director. Of course, Owen Burstyn, the great Estelle Parsons, and others. I was never a Strasberg guy. I only knew him at the end, and that wouldn't have worked very well for me, probably. Mm-hmm. So those are the people but I've learned my craft, I guess, from being with some great actors. Some we've mentioned, Bob Duvall, certainly one of the greats. And of course, watching acting heroes of mine, I would think particularly of, aside from Marlon, because Marlon is sort of in this other place, he just exists, and, we all worship Marlon, of course. But Bogart, to me, is just, there's no better actor, because I think he's thought of so often as a leading man. But in fact, Bogey was just a great character actor, is what he was. And that's what I've always kind of patterned or, tried to emulate in a sense, was the great work that he did in things like, Petrified Forest and Treasure of the Sierra Madre, and Caine Mutiny, and all of that. So Bogart's a major one to me.
We talked about some of your early films, but can you point to one film or one scene in a film which made you think, I want to be a movie actor? We talked a little bit about that Jack Palance scene in Shane when he sees Shane for the first time. Yeah. Did that ever happen to you?
Well, actually, Jack Palance was a very important, that scene, not that scene, that entire performance is an important performance to me. I hold that performance, Jack Palance as the gunman Wilson in the film Shane with Alan Ladd, George Stevens, great Western. That to me is the most efficient villain ever created on film. I hold him up as this is everything that a villain should be. He's exotic, he's spicy, he's attractive, and he's used with great efficiency. He's not all over the place, I think if I had to pick for the actress, I think it would have to be Margaret Hamilton, who is, you can't kind of improve on that performance. And then there are many other great villains, of course, through the years. But that scene meant a lot to me. But if I had to pick, I don't know if I could pick a scene. I think that the film of, there are a number of films. There was a film that John Ford made called Wee Willie Winkie, with Shirley Temple and Victor McLaughlin, that I saw. I'm not kidding. I saw it when I was about 7, and it reduced me to I was just weeping at the when Victor McLaughlin died. It was just one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen. I think there are many things like that. Of course, the film that I always return to is Bridge on the River Kwai. Yeah.
Well, great movie.
Yeah.
Well, before we get to Avatar, I wanted to ask you about the Don't Breathe films. I mean, I rewatched Don't Breathe 1 the other day, and I don't mind myself blood and gore at all. But some of it was so creepy that I had to sort of turn away. I'm just curious about, you seem to be attracted to those kinds of roles. And I wanted to remind you that Swarthmore is a Quaker college. So I was curious about where this comes from in you.
No, Quakers can be creepy too. I don't know. Look, there's a flip answer that one can give, and it's something that the great Robert Mitchum said. When they asked Mitchum how he chose his roles, he said, "Well, I read what's offered and I accept the least embarrassing." So I mean, there's that. But the honest truth of the matter is, I love Don't Breathe, and I love that character. It's an incredibly challenging character to play for me, and I. In that rugged way. And if you're talking about Don't Breathe, the original Don't Breathe, Peter, there's very, very little blood in that film. You're projecting a lot of your dread and fear.
Well, that may be true, but that's to the film's credit.
Now in the second one, admittedly, we do open a few veins in that movie, but
and I hear you're signed up for a third one.
Oh, I'm contemplating.
Sympathetic to a third one.
I think I might kill the old buzzard off this time.
Why don't you just very briefly tell people what it's about? I'm not sure everybody's seen it.
Don't Breathe?
Yeah, what the character is.
Basically, what's interesting about Don't Breathe is this. I play a blind man who lives kind of in his own home in a bombed out section of Detroit. And it's well known that I have some money in there, and three punks, two guys and a girl, decide they're going to come in and rob me, and they come in, and once they're in, they came to the wrong place, and they mess with the wrong guy, because I'm very, very capable, and within the confines of my own kingdom, I know where everything is. I'm good, and so I end up destroying all of them. And what's really interesting about it is that for the first half of the movie, I truly am the victim. I'm having a crime perpetrated upon me. These people, I wasn't bothering nobody. But then halfway through the movie, you learn a very dark secret about my character. And so that changes things for the audience. But what has happened, in my estimation, is that at that point, the relationship between the blind man and the audience has been created. And so it's sort of like, I'm sort of like the uncle that you actually have loved all your life, and then you find out that he's a weirdo.
Maniac.
You find out he's the Unabomber, and you still kind of love the guy, but it's like, you don't want to be around him anymore. That's what that film was. And of course, it was a hugely successful film. So it only makes sense to kind of, do it. The sequel, they kind of pushed the envelope a little bit. And it's amazing how annoyed people got as the blind man moves into semi-heroic territory. People are not willing to forgive the sins of his past at all. Some are, but many, many were livid with the change that happens. It's just sort of interesting to see the investment that people make, that moviegoers make in characters, So we'll see what happens if there's.
You think it's more interesting to play villains than heroes, sort of traditional heroes? Not villains, but bad guys, I should say.
Look, I think everybody is the hero of their own narrative. I'm sure we're going to talk about Avatar a bit, and certainly Quaritch doesn't conceive of himself as the villain of the piece or a bad guy. If he's called that, he wouldn't care one way. It would be, water off his back. Big
Can I
time.
jump? Yeah. Oh,
Yes,
sorry.
please.
Oh, no, because I was looking at some, comments in YouTube about how much Korch is, what a beloved character he is. This is like, so glad he's returning for all 3 sequels. Not even death stands in this man's way. The guy's pure, relentless, badass. Can't wait to see how much further Cameron and Stephen Lang take the character.
Oh, that's
So
very
just
nice.
as a transition to like villainy or badass or
Yeah. Well, that's what we. That's what we're going for. It seems to me, not to just because I think he was in the original Avatar. He really was kind of he was a function, a colorful function. He had personality, no question about it. But he really was a function of evil in that. And I think we do have an opportunity now as things go ahead to show some of the other aspects of him. It's not going to remove, he's not looking for redemption in any way. That's not what we're talking about. But I would say, the character Jim Cameron feels that the character is not only useful in terms of his narrative, but the character is worthwhile in terms of in terms of exploring and getting enmeshed in the story of Pandora. So and of course, when you see Avatar: Way of Water, and I expect and I hope that at least some of the folks who are tuning in tonight have seen it, and for those of you who haven't seen it, I really urge you to go see it during this holiday season, because we've got to make $2 billion or else we're a flop. See, come on. So in any case, I lost my train of thought there, you have all these characters in Avatar who are radiant. They're just filled with light. And of course, none of that would exist without a character of darkness, it seems to me. And so he's very, very important. But the thing that's also important there is, just as the darkness really does inform the radiance of this world, it'll be really interesting from my point of view to see how the radiance of the world informs this darkness and what it does to him, and see what kind of change is possible. So that's kind of a lot of mumbo jumbo, but it's the way I think of it.
Well, take us behind the scenes a little bit with Avatar 1, the first Avatar. How did you get connected to it?
It's a theater story. I was opening my play. I have a solo play called Beyond Glory, which I wrote. And I portray 8 Medal of Honor recipients from World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. And I wrote it in 2003, and really from 2003 on, it's what I was doing. I was really dedicated to doing this. And finally, the Roundabout Theater in New York called and said we wanted to come here to the Laura Pells, their beautiful 500-seat house on 46th Street. That was a huge deal for me, because I built this show from nothing, and here I was going to open it in New York. And of course, the Roundabout ran an ad in the New York Times, which was a picture of me in what I have to call now a sleeveless T-shirt. It was a sleeveless T-shirt, and it was a military pose, looking real strack. And out on the coast, Marjorie Simpkin, who is Jim's casting director, she's an old she's an old New Yorker, and she was reading the New York Times. She saw the ad, she saw the photo, and she said, "Hey, Jim, do you know Stephen Lang?" And he said, "Good actor, good actor. He auditioned for Aliens, almost got the part. Wow." And she showed him the picture in Times, and they both said, "Huh, Quaritch." And so I had a call that they would like me to read this script. And understand, I'm in my last week of previews in New York, and I've been working on this play now for several years. So this is what I'm doing. My life is a big deal anyway. But all of a sudden, this thing comes to me, and I'm like, yeah, a Jim Cameron script. I absolutely want to read it. So after signing my life away, promising I wouldn't reveal anything at all, this script comes to me. And just as a footnote, I'll say there was a note, from the desk up kind of thing, from John Landau, who is the producer of Avatar. And it was the most empowering thing it could have been. It said, "Stephen, your role is Colonel Miles Quaritch. We are so delighted that you are taking the time to read our script." And I'm like, really? You're delighted that I'm reading it? it was just such a great thing to read. And then I read it and I was like, holy shit, this is definitely the best role in this. And from then he and I had a phone conversation. And then on a Sunday afternoon, which my last show of the week was a 3:00 matinee on a Sunday. After that, I was taken to the airport, flew out to LA. Monday morning, went up to Malibu to his place. We met, we worked, we talked. He got behind the camera. We just improvised for an hour and a half, 2 hours. And then we were done. And at some point, there's kind of nothing more to say. And, we shook hands and I left for the airport, and then my phone started ringing, and, I was offered the role, and that's how it worked out. I can do a long form of that story that I just told, which can bring actors to tears, because it's kind of a Schwab's drugstore moment, It's a good story, but that's the basic facts. That's what happened.
Well, can you talk a little bit about Cameron? What kind of guy he is? I mean, he's,
well,
he's a bit of an enigma.
Yes, wrapped in a mystery.
Right.
I would characterize Jim as really kind of the Leonardo of our time, because he's equal parts engineer, scientist, and visionary artist. I mean, he's equally adept in all those things, plus the fact that he's an adventurer and a lot of other things as well. So he's an extremely accomplished guy. He's a student of the world, which is always a wonderful thing. He asks as many questions as anybody I've ever. He asks as many questions as my father did, and my father was always asking questions. He leads by example, which is to say, I bring your A game if you're coming to work for Jim Cameron, but you do that because he's bringing his A game too. He's there to get the work done. I think that he has certainly leavened over the last decade. He's well satisfied, I think, with his life and what he's accomplished. And I don't think he feels he has anything to prove. And I think there was probably a time when he did. I think that I remember seeing an interview with him years ago for Canadian television, where he was asked for a self-assessment. And he said, well, I think I'm a pretty good director and a not very good leader. And I think that was a revealing thing to say. And as I pointed out, Jim is a lifelong learner. And I think that Jim was interested in becoming a better leader, and I think he really has applied himself to that. So in terms of dealing with actors, you couldn't ask for more. He deals with each actor in the way each actor needs to be dealt with. There's not just one sort of by rote way, He deals with me in a very, very different way than he deals with Sigourney, for example, or with Zoe or Sam. And I appreciate that. And I find that it really benefits the work that we do. And it's very canny of him to just have the ability to do that, the instinctual knowledge to do that, I think. So, and he's got a great sense of humor. I mean, there's a lot of laughter, and that's pretty vital to everything as well.
Right. Well, Patty, I think apparently it's time for questions.
Yes, thank you so much. I've been just sitting back and losing track of time. So we do have some questions from the attendees, and two of them are about, this is from Dom Sagola, and also a related question from Tone Cow about the challenges. What is the most challenging moment in this film's making for you? And then the second question was related. I'd love to hear more about your excitement as well as the challenges that come for preparing for this role.
Well, I think that certainly the greatest overall challenge was performing the role, was the performance capture nature of this role. Whereas in the first film, it was all live action for me. In this film, it's almost exclusively performance capture. And I'm very happy about that, because I believe that performance capture is kind of the defining process of the Avatar world, you know. And I love playing Korach as live action, but I equally love what he's become, but in the Avatar form. But it requires some changes, you know. You're working in an empty space that we call the volume. And you're working in a performance capture rig. So I don't have my, you know, Fellini said that the most important time for an actor is when when he or she is in the makeup chair. And I think there's so much truth in that. You walk in, you're tired with your cup of coffee, you walk out and you've become, you know, Conan the Barbarian or whoever. But performance cap, and I indeed did experience that with Quartz. I'd always have my camis just the way I wanted them, my boots the way I wanted them, my gun was slung on the way I wanted it, everything was the way I wanted it. When you're doing performance capture, you're wearing essentially what looks like a diving suit with a head rig on it. So I just made the translation that became my uniform, and I basically went at it the same way. And that's all well and good. And we did the work. We worked hard on it. It's hard work to do. A lot of it's hard because it's physically demanding role. But then things got really squirrely when we had to go underwater with it, because this is the way of water. And there's a lot that happens in the water. Interestingly, my character, my role, Quaritch, he's not a water character. If he's in the water, he's generally trying to get out of the water. Whereas there's a whole raft of characters in this, for that water is their milieu. It's where they want to be, you know? So the water work was very, very challenging, I would say. But also, I mean, when you get right down to it, just to try to find the mysterious heart of this character is really where the challenge kind of is. And that's not something that I'm even particularly adept at talking about. I think, you know, I'm still looking, because we have a journey. The journey's not over by any means, it seems to me. So that was a great challenge. And I think the other part of the question was about the excitement or joy of this whole thing.
Yes.
It's just so, I'm just so fortunate to be part of this world. I mean, because it had, the original film it really did have a cultural impact, you know, and I think without putting too much on it, I think it did change films. And so it's very validating, I guess, to be in something like that. And it also creates, you know, a sense of responsibility. I always want to live up to the franchise, if that's what it is. Yeah, I just want to continue to do my best. And, you know, I'm not a kid. And so a lot of it has to do with maintaining my, you know, just my physical presence, so I can actually perform for the next, you know, 10 years or so.
Well, you do a great job of that, I have to say. We have a couple questions that are related to the morality of your character, so I thought I'd bundle those two together. One says, how do you feel about the seeming lack of morals and xenophobic nature of these ex-Marine characters? Mm-hmm. Are these characters meant to display the evil nature of a hyper-capitalistic future America? That's from Trevor Rudolph. And as you think about that, I'll just give this other one. Okay. It says, I just watched the new movie and loved it. I wanted to see what your thoughts were on Quaritch's morals. I thought his status as the bad guy was a little more ambiguous than in Avatar 1. And I honestly feel like there were points where his aims were similarly compelling to Sully's. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was interesting.
It is interesting. I think that in terms of what they represent, I think you're dead on with that. We represent the military industrial complex, the colonization, that wicked arm of colonization that happens. And in terms of his morality, I think that he lives by, first of all, I think that a lot of his sense of morality was burned away long ago, cauterized away. He's a veteran of wars on Earth that every one of them was a dirty, dirty war. These were children's wars, you know. My own personal sort of narrative for Quaritch was that he signed up for the right reasons. Sometimes he wanted to be all that he could be, you know. He was born by nature a warrior, and I think that, you know, he's probably incarnated as a warrior time and time and time again. His code, as it were, I wouldn't say morality, but his code is one of loyalty to his particular clan, which would be the Jarhead clan. And and I think that, you know, it getting into the righteousness or the immorality of any particular cause is not beneficial to his job, to him doing his job. And of course, he was the head of security there. He was the head of security in an environment that is just inherently very, very insecure. First thing he says in the original movie is, I'm here to keep you alive. I will not succeed. And I mean, that's a very kind of a down sort of a thing. You know, you're not starting from ground zero there. You're starting from negative somewhere there. And I think, so I'm not surprised that his worldview is jaundiced, it seems to me. But having said that, he has a wonderfully grim and ironic sense of humor. And I think he's got a lot of admiration for Sully, for Jake. And that's the source of what's going to go down with everything. That to be betrayed by Jake Sully is so painful to him, because he really, really had faith in this guy. He sees in himself, he sees himself in Sully, I think, you know. So that gives us a good journey to go on as the sequels progress.
This is a question, Stephen, that's related, but a kind of a broader, and it's from Bill Prindle, who said he was on campus with you and remembered you as a talented actor doing leads in Ibsen plays. So can you talk about your journey from Lovborg to Quaritch, and any reflections specifically on masculinity as it's been portrayed, like over that, you know, past century, with all of the evolution of gender identity that's happened over that time? So just, you know, both the characters and their masculinity, but also how you think about it.
That's a boy, oh boy, it's a very wide topic.
You could take the Fifth Amendment.
Yeah, the only thing, what it brings to mind is one of the first successes I had in New York was I played Václav Nijinsky in a play called Clownmaker. And it really deals with Nijinsky, his homosexual relationship with Sergei Diaghilev, you know, and it was very, it was interesting and fascinating, and I felt for me to undertake, you know, that role, and I did reflect on, you know, on these questions of hypermasculinity at the time, of domination at the time. I'm going back a long, long way with this, but it's the first I was able to do a role that had what's the word, you know, different contours than what I think I've become identified with. I did a film called Last Exit to Brooklyn, in which I play a very hard-ass labor guy, a shop steward named Harry Black, who falls in love with a transvestite, you know, and it completely destroys his life, you know. But it's so fascinating that it's what brings out whatever poetry he has in what is a really, really tortured soul. So I know I'm just kind of listing credits now rather than dealing with the question. We'll do that another time. Peter, I'd like to toss this one to you.
I'll take the Fifth Amendment.
Well, I mean, it is such an incredible gallery of characters that really ask us to think about masculinity. And I think in the Avatar space, there's, you know, borders between human and non-human that are also kind of playing with that. So I guess I'm going to pick up a couple questions here that are about about just performing, to pick up on how you were talking about motion capture and the challenges of that. One of them asks if you had a special trainer for doing that. And another just asks you to expand a little bit more on how Cameron worked differently with different actors, specifically because those VFX scenes ask for something different from actors. So
Right.
if you could talk a little bit about just, the collaborative nature of those performances.
We had wonderful trainers, not necessarily in performance capture, but in all the stuff we were going to have to do. In terms of breath holding, there's been a lot written and spoken about the breath holds that we do. Certainly in parkour, moving through the rainforest, you want to move with the agility of a dire wolf, if you can. So we were schooled and trained in all of these things, and this was, we're talking about a year at least of training that we were doing. It was ongoing throughout. The performance capture, we have a troupe of performance capture actors. One or two of them have been doing it since the very, very early days of performance capture. But it's not that hard to pick up. It's not that hard to understand what you have to do. You get it if you've been doing it. And of course, what I think is just so fascinating is the kids, because we've got a lot of kids, a lot of youngsters in Avatar. Well, as far as they're concerned, acting is performance capture. I mean, this is their first job, and to them, this is how you go about acting, and I think that's just fantastic. I mean, they're all going to do other things too. Obviously, they're going to do live action, but it's important to us to incorporate the concept of performance capture into the world of acting as an absolute part of the art and the craft of acting. In terms of Jim dealing with actors differently, I'll give you this. The personal example is this. Jim Cameron and I tend to work together in a very, very public fashion. We yell at each other across the room. We have conferences too, but we yell at each other across the room. We talk loudly across the room, knowing that the crew is all kind of tuning into it because we're extremely amusing. Why is this happening? It's not out of vanity particularly. It's because I play an alpha male by any, I don't care whether Quaritch is big and blue or he's live action. He is alpha. He dominates space. So when I come onto the set, I don't care what it is. Basically, I think it's mine. Okay. Now, Jim Cameron is an alpha male. He's Quaritch too. He wrote him. So you've got two of us there doing this thing. And the thing is, we're both aware of this, and we both play on it and use it, and it works to the benefit of what's going on. It works to the benefit of the scene. So that's just kind of not a complete view of how we work together. I think there's a lot of nuances to what we do. But that's one aspect of it that you would never, ever see with, say, Zoe Saldana. With Zoe, many times you'll look over and Zoe and Jim are sitting down together having this kind of long heart-to-heart where he is really just, he's parsing the character out in ways that are going to make sense to her. So you couldn't ask for it to be dealt with more differently. All of the kids were very, very differently, and he developed a style of working with, some of them you got to get the whip out on you. You got to kind of yank a knot in your tail, a little bit. And some of them you don't, all you got to do is, throw them a chocolate kiss and they're off to the races, So I would say that's it's a great skill, because there are many directors, and some who are extremely successful and good directors who basically deal with actors in one way. Yeah. They deal with every actor the same, and that's okay, But I think Jim knows how to get the best out of people.
We probably have time for just one more. And I guess I'm going to ask a question. This is from Grace Dumda, who's actually a recent Swarthmore graduate and a very talented actor. And she's asking, as is someone else in the chat, if you have any advice for young people pursuing acting professionally, especially in this strange online-only auditioning era.
Embrace it. Embrace the online auditioning. I don't think it's bad. In any case, it is. You know, listen, auditioning, the audition process has always been artificial and rotten. It's just the way it is. This probably goes back to Aeschylus and Euripides. You know, it was rotten auditioning back then. I think it's just tough. So I'd embrace the technology and just, you know, it's kind of shut up and do your job. Just sort of just be honest and get it out there. I don't advice. It's hard to give advice to young people. You just gotta, if you love it and if you have to do it, don't do it if you don't have to do it. There's too many other things to do. And, you know, it's a question of supply and demand. There's always going to be plenty of actors, it seems to me, and more work than actors. So if there's something else that you can love, you do it. But we started off this by saying, I was saying, I think I had a calling to be an actor. And to be honest, even if I didn't have a successful career, I'd probably still be an actor and probably be counting my successes in different ways wherever I possibly could. You know what I mean? And that's fine. That's fine too. You know, so if I can't tell anybody how to go about it. You just gotta, when I came to New York, I auditioned for anything. I auditioned for musicals, and I mean, I just would go in and try it, and once in a while I'd get cast in something. And you know, yeah. I'm sorry, I wish I could give you, I wish there was a magic answer to give you on this, but if you love it, just keep at it.
Do it.
That's a great answer.
Yeah. Stephen, thank you so much. And I know you have to rush off to Lincoln Center there. So I hope you don't have to talk for another hour there, because you've just really given us a lot. There's a lot of really wonderful messages and compliments for you in the chat, which I'm sure we will save for you. And thank you all for coming tonight. And yeah, good luck. Go see the movie, and
Yeah, everybody have a wonderful holiday. Go see Avatar: The Way of Water. It really is. It's a thrilling experience, I believe, and thanks to the alumni, to Bohi, and to everyone involved, to you, Patty, and of course to Peter Biskin, who is a real hero of mine. I love you, Peter, and thanks. That's for
sweet.
For talking. Yes, I am sweet. Yeah, I'm really
under it all. Under it all. Just a marshmallow.
Thank you, everyone. Good night. Thank you,
Good night,
Peter.
everybody.
Thank you.